Roger McGull is here at OSCON in Portland 2018. And I'm here with Adrian and Zaheda from AWS. We're here to talk about open source in the enterprise and what AWS, who's clearly a very important player in this whole space, is doing. So you were both here last year, starting from a small team. What have you been able to accomplish in the past year?
Well, we were recruiting last year. Really, we spent the first year building out the team, and this year we've got a few more things going. We just about got our Twitter handle going at last OSCON. It's like, okay, we hired a couple of people. We need a Twitter handle.
Yeah,
so we got
started on the first day of OSCON.
First day of OSCON, and now we've got a website. We've got a blog. We do a couple of blog posts a week. So we've got the people. We've got the communications set up, and we've got specialists in different areas. So that's kind of getting everything going, and then we're engaging with more of the AWS teams. The other big thing last year, we joined the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, so we did the internal justification to do that, and Arun and myself from our team are basically the CNCF reps that manage that relationship, and then going through getting Kubernetes support into the company and developing an open source workshop that a lot of people contributed to build out how to run Kubernetes on AWS, and then actually culminating the launch of the Kubernetes product, EKS, at the end of the year. So that's probably the biggest thing that we've accomplished in the last year.
Yeah, and along with that, OSCON was our kind of first big presence last year, and so we hired somebody to come in and do events, Shirley Bales, and we've been engaging in a lot more events over last year, and especially this year we're here, big participation at OSCON, and participating in a lot of the open source activities and meetups, and some of the smaller community events as well. So we're supporting those too.
Mm-hmm. And with things like the various foundations, other than just joining CNCF, it's a pretty big one, but we've joined OSI, and ONAG, and a few others. So we're sort of working on which foundations should we be supporting? Are we the right level in them? How are we doing that? So there's the foundational thing. We're also been doing some work with some projects with some of our customers. Some people may know I helped create the Netflix open source program, but we've actually gone back to that and we're doing some contributions to the Spinnaker project that Netflix came up with, and we actually have engineering effort going into contributions to that. So trying to sort of mix it up and figure out where we can be most helpful. And some of it's outbound, some of it is working with the various engineering teams across AWS, the service teams, to say, okay, they're coming to us and saying, we're thinking of doing an open source related thing to do with our service. What's the best way of doing that, and how can we reach the communities we need to?
And another area as well is that working with our engineering teams, as Adrian mentioned, we also work with the To-Do group at the Linux Foundation, which is a collaboration of a bunch of kind of companies that are leading in the open source space and sharing best practices. So we've released some tools that help us with some of our kind of management of GitHub repos and reporting. We've got an open source dashboard that's out there as well, and we've been contributing to projects that are helping other companies with the compliance around open source. So, the kind of roles that the Open Source Program Office would typically perform, we've been supporting those as well.
Mm-hmm. I imagine that the foundations and other organizations would really like to have you guys as members. Is that true, and are you having to, you mentioned that you've really got to decide who you're going to join, but it seems like you're an important player. And
I mean, we're generally, everyone wants us to join. It's more about, what's, from my team, I need somebody to be able to focus on it. If somebody needs to turn up at board meetings or working groups, I've got to be able to resource it. So it's mostly about, as we're adding people to the team, we've had the bandwidth to take on more entities that we want to engage with, and I'm adding different specializations to the team to sort of broaden it out. So it's really just kind of as we get our act together and get people on board, we're able to take on more things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the foundations have been just very positive, and of course, everyone's very keen for us to engage and participate. So we've had an overwhelming response.
Yeah, that's what I would have imagined. So What are you announcing here at OSCON?
Yeah, we had a keynote, and the announcement was this book, Open Source in the Enterprise. And this is targeted at not just the enterprise, but government and startups who want to. There's a lot of people consuming open source, and obviously every business out there that's building services in the cloud is consuming open source. And the goal of this is to provide resource material for organizations and references to help them with the questions they have around consumption, but also around contribution. So how do they contribute, and where are some of the resources? How do they work with the open source communities and work in this sort of shared collaborative way that we've been doing for a long time? And if they have a project to release, how do they do that? So, referencing obviously a lot of O'Reilly material and books that have been written by some of the authors that come to conferences like OSCON, but also the Linux Foundation has been a big contributor to this as well as the to-do group. They have all these guides online, which are best practices that some of the folks from different companies, what they've tried out, what works, what doesn't work, and they've been posting a whole host of guides, and all of that material is referenced in here. So it's a very great short summary for anybody that's new to open source or already doing open source that wants to learn more about the latest activities.
Yeah, and just to reinforce why this is probably important, I had given a keynote today about what's popular that we see on our platform, and the cloud, despite it not being very new, is very popular, and clearly open source is very popular, kind of dominating the things that we see, the activity we see at our site. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of legs in this space, meaning there's going to be many, many years of people working.
Yeah, so and this is we have physical copies here at OSCON, and we have an online PDF that anyone can download, and it's on our website, opensource.amazon.com, and they can go download and actually share it with as many folks as they want to.
Great. What can developers working on AWS expect in the next 10 months or so?
Well, we've got we're supporting a lot of things now. So basically all the new things coming out are open source, but a lot of the hot areas, so particularly machine learning and deep learning, it's interesting because if you go back 5 or 10 years, this was a very proprietary kind of specialization. The hardware and the software was hard to get to. We've now reached the point where the most common and best supported libraries and frameworks are all open source. And then the hardware is available in the cloud by the second, so you can, with really very little friction now, stand up a state-of-the-art deep learning AI environment, and it's enabled a huge explosion in the number of people with access to it, the number of use cases. So we're seeing that come up everywhere. And we're investing in more and more ways to effectively productize that, to make it easier to access. And we've got a tool called SageMaker, which is basically a Jupyter framework, the Jupyter notebook system. It's not an open source framework, but that lets you, but it's already got plugged into it without you having to go and debug and get the right version of Python installed and all these kinds of things. All of that stuff's debugged for you, so you can just get on with building the thing you want. You're a data scientist or an analyst, you want to do some work. But we're pulling in fully integrated versions of TensorFlow and MXNet and PyTorch and Chainer, and we just added Chainer a few months ago. It's important to the Japanese market. So as these new frameworks come along, and PyTorch didn't exist 2 years ago, it was only announced early last year. So we're seeing this as a very rapidly moving space where new algorithms and new frameworks are just popping up. The domain of what it can do is getting broader. So I think you'll see a lot of activity there, and a lot more applications being built where people are figuring out how to apply AI to things that are, just sort of do-over. Thing plus AI is new thing, right? Mm-hmm. We're getting a lot of that kind of activity right now.
Right. And are you doing anything around making the interface to AWS easier as open source projects? Is that?
Yeah, we open sourced all our documentation and announced that a few months ago. So basically, if you find anything that is confusing or a spelling mistake or whatever, you send us a pull request on GitHub, and that's actually now how we've got all of everything there. right? So it's that's one of the ways. I mean, there's a lot of other ways to make things easier to manage. We're always taking customer input to make the products better.
Sounds great. Well, thanks both of you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.